On today's podcast, we sit down with veteran artist manager and founder of Slush Management, Neal O'Connor. Neal's worked with artists ranging from System of a Down and Alice in Chains to breaking new grounds with Porter Robinson's Second Sky Festival. We dive deep into the evolving role of artist managers today, why building an authentic world around your music is more crucial than ever, and what it really takes for artists to break through all of the noise, from marketing and collaboration to live experiences and building lifelong fans. Neal shares powerful insights on longevity and how to create a career with cultural impact in today's music business. This is an absolute must-listen episode for artists, managers, and anyone looking to survive and thrive in the modern industry. Insiders, are you ready? Welcome to MUBUTV's Music Business Insider Podcast, where our mission is to educate, empower, and engage artists and music business professionals who are dedicated to having a successful career in the new music industry. Here are your hosts, Rich Ezra and Eric Knight.
Welcome back, Insiders, to another episode of the MUBUTV Music Business Insider Podcast, where our mission is to educate, empower, and engage your music career. On today's episode, we sit down with Neal O'Connor, founder and artist manager at Slush Management, who's been on the front lines of artist careers from legendary bands like System of a Down and Deftones to breaking the next generation of talent. We dive deep into why the role of the artist manager has never been more crucial than in today's shifting music business landscape, what it takes for artists to build authentic, world-class brands that resonate with fans, and why just great music is no longer enough. Neal shares what managers look for in artists beyond talent, the real value of record labels today, and the exact qualities that help artists cut through the noise, from marketing savvy to uncompromising authenticity. If you've ever wondered, when do you need a manager, if you should sign that record deal, or how to create deep, lasting connections with fans that can sustain a multi-decade career, this episode is a must-listen. Plus, strategies for thriving in today's touring challenges, the art of collaboration, and how to overcome the biggest obstacles that hold artists back, straight from someone helping shape the future of the music business. You don't want to miss this insightful and practical conversation. But first, a word from our sponsor.
Hey Insiders, ready to crush it in the music world? Whether you're an artist, band, or future music biz pro, MUBUTV's personalized coaching is your secret weapon.
We'll work with you side by side, sharpening your songs, building your brand story, locking in your ideal audience, and powering up your social media game.
Starting fresh or ready for the next level, we cover everything. Live shows, marketing hacks, branding, all tailored just for you.
Flexible coaching packages let you decide what fits your time and budget. Single sessions or discounted bundles that make investing easy.
Imagine the boost after just one session. Clearer goals, smarter strategies, and unstoppable confidence. Get started with a free 15-minute discovery call at book.mubutv.com. That's book.mubutv.com. Let's make your music career unstoppable. Hey Insiders, are you ready to take serious control of your music career? Whether you're dreaming of getting signed, finding the perfect artist manager, or landing your music in movies and TV shows, MUBUTV has you covered with 3 essential free guides.
First, learn how to contact A&R the right way. The insider secrets to approaching executives without burning bridges and with confidence.
Next, discover how to attract the right artist manager, when to start looking, what to expect, and how to find someone who truly believes in your vision.
And finally, unlock the world of sync licensing with how to pitch to music supervisors the right way. Get your music placed in film and TV, reach new audiences, and open up exciting revenue streams.
These guides are packed with real-world advice, practical steps, and the do's and don'ts every artist needs.
If you're listening on this podcast or watching on YouTube, just check the description below to download your free copies now. This is your blueprint for turning dreams into reality. Don't miss out.
Hi, this is Dave Ronan, founder and CEO of Roix, and you're listening to the MUBUTV Music Business Insider Podcast.
Welcome back, Insiders. Today's featured guest is Neal O'Connor, founder and artist manager at Slush Management. This was a great conversation, Eric, on many levels. He is a man who is truly on the front lines of today's music business, and he spoke about the career aspect of artists from many, many levels, from the development level to the label level to all kinds of, I guess what we would call the subtext of various aspects of the career. One of the things that I think he spoke of that really was most interesting to me, which isn't often discussed, is how the value of a record label is not the same for every artist. And that's something that is totally different. You know, he speaks about the value not being the same. He says artists aiming for top 40 or international careers may truly need a major label, but other than that, he didn't feel that it served the same value. And that's an interesting principle. You know, Rick Salmon last year spoke about that same thing as well. And, you know, primarily he said labels offer funding and teams, and if you can fund your own vision, you may not need a label.
Yeah.
So, you know, we've always spoke about that labels are more amplifiers.
Exactly. One of the other areas, Rich, that I thought was uniquely important in this discussion was the idea that even major label artists must self-manage many aspects of their career. Labels might bring more opportunities, like you're saying, the amplification that we talk about, but artists are still expected to do significant work in marketing, branding, and content creation. And that's on the major label level today. And goes back to, again, the label, they're great at amplifying. And if you're that type of artist that needs that major label push, they are incredible, but you're still going to have to put in the work. And it's a beautiful thing to listen to, because when you're hearing it from somebody like Neal, that's at the top levels, you realize that whether you're doing this on your own and you're bootstrapping it, or you're on Atlantic Records, you're going to be doing the same shit no matter what.
Absolutely, yes. And that's why, you know, you have to get that a career is a full-time commitment. And that's a very important point that you just made, that there isn't that distinction, you know, whether you're doing it on your own or with Atlantic.
It's hard enough for the record labels to get the attention, and they've got millions of dollars behind them, and they're trying to break artists that they're having a struggle with.
That's right. That's absolutely right. So, yeah, I could not agree with you more. That's a very, I guess, what we call essential foundational element of this conversation.
And with that, insiders, sit back, relax, and enjoy our featured conversation with Neal O'Connor.
Neal, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for joining us. You know, it's said today that managers are more important in an artist's career than at any other time due to the radically changing nature of the business. Would you agree? And if so, why?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think if you look to, you know, what the music business was like, you know, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, I think you'd see a landscape where the labels were much more instrumental in everything and did a lot of the stuff that managers are expected to do today. And so I think, you know, managers have more responsibilities than ever. I mean, just look at the online landscape and, you know, everything that we have to do in terms of social media and content creation that just used to not even exist, right? That alone is a huge lift. Not to mention that I think for a lot of artists these days, you're releasing independently or with some kind of a distribution deal or different ways of doing things where the manager kind of acts as the label as well.
Yeah. And you know, I as I'm listening to you, I'm realizing even if you're on a major label, the amount of work that they ask an artist to do in these realms that you're speaking about is quite extensive.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think a lot of up and coming artists maybe have an idea in their head that if I could just sign with a major label, they would take care of so much and make my life easier. And I think maybe the opposite is true, is they just ask you to do more, right? And they're bringing you more opportunities, hopefully, and they're coming up with more ideas, hopefully. And, you know, there's more, there ends up being more to do.
Precisely.
You know, Neal, welcome to the show. First and foremost, it's really great to have you. I wanted to ask you, you know, when do you feel an artist needs a manager?
I think when there is some business to manage, and I think when there is some kind of a trajectory and there's some good things happening. I think there's definitely points at which it's too early and a manager can't necessarily add a whole lot. But I think once something starts to click, once something starts rolling for an artist, I think is really when they need it. That could be that some bigger artists are discovering them and wanting to collaborate or take them on tour with them. It could be they have a song that starts catching some steam organically, things like that. You know, I think once the first little bit of momentum starts, I think is probably the ideal time for an artist to try to get a manager.
You know, on that note, notwithstanding talent, what are the 3 top non-creative qualities that you look for in the artists that you're willing to sign as a manager?
Yeah, I think so. So one of them is that, right? Like, I'm never really looking to sign someone that's, I mean, it all has to start with the music. Music does have to be great first and foremost before anything, right? Because it's the music business.
Right.
But I think once that is there, though, I'm looking for something else that's happening, some kind of spark, kind of like what I was describing before. So that's one thing. Another thing I think is a work ethic. I think artists have to work harder than ever, kind of related to some of the stuff that we were talking about a moment ago. And I think, artists need to be individuals that can do marketing of themselves, right? In addition to making the music. And they have to be able to wake up and be ready to work hard every day on their project. And they have to care about it just as much or more than the manager does. So that's really important. And then I think, someone with a vision, right? Like someone that has specific goals for what they're trying to do and accomplish, and a specific vision for how what they're doing fits into the culture, I think visually, artistically, and musically.
Yeah, they have to have a vision for themselves and think this all out. It's an interesting point because, we always hear the notion that, artists feel if I had a manager, somehow I would have a career. And it's not true.
Right.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. That's not really how it works. I think a manager is useful in amplifying and kind of helping you find your audience once you've already got something going. I think it's about amplification, really. And it's about organization, and I think it's about building a team of experts around the artist, right? So the manager is kind of the face in the business world for the artist. And once you have some kind of business that's happening, you want someone who's going to build the team around you, whether that's label, booking agent, attorney, publicist, accounting, all that stuff.
Neal, I really love that phrase that you use, world building for artists. How do you define an artist's world, and what are the essential ingredients that make it resonate authentically with fans?
Yeah, I think world building is super important for artists. They need to have a brand that extends beyond just the music. And I think that means once you have people hooked, once you have people interested, and you have a world for them to kind of dive into, right? That's what they're doing online. That's how you're communicating with your fans. That's kind of what you're giving your fans. It's your aesthetic. It's your art. It's your videos. It's really important to have a cohesive, defined brand and world around what you're doing beyond the music, and it has to all be cohesive.
Yeah, it's interesting because, we often hear and we often talk on this show about it is so important that, even on a subtext that fans know who you are and what you're about and where you're coming from and what you stand for, and how all of that today needs to be represented. When you're marketing yourself, even as an independent artist just starting out, those things are super important. They're important in the images. They're important in the look that you have, the physical look. They're important in the photos that you put on your website, in your social media setup, in your logo design. All of that has to be reflective in that from that point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. And it all has to be authentic, right? Because I think people can see through stuff that's contrived or that's not real. And, the artist has to be that person every day. And so I think artists have to really look deep in themselves and kind of figure out what's cool to me, what's exciting to me, what am I passionate about, and how do I sort of build that world from that foundation in terms of everything I do and how I communicate and how I present myself. And I think if you can do a good job of doing it authentically while kind of like dialing up the parts that are unique and interesting about what's authentic to you, then I think fans really resonate with that.
I would totally agree. I think we're totally on the same page on that. I want to ask you another question in that, we often hear today that, a record label, a record deal is so important. And I think traditionally it was. In your mind, Neal, is the value of a record label in today's world the same for all artists?
Absolutely not. And I think it's less important than it's ever been in general, but it really is an artist by artist proposition. It's really specific to each artist and what they're trying to do. And there's such a big kind of continuum of what we're talking about when we talk about labels, right? It's everything from sort of what so-called artist services deals all the way up to major label deals and every kind of size of indie label in between those things, right? I think at kind of a base level, the sort of fundamental main thing that you're getting from a label is money, right? And budgets to execute stuff that maybe you don't have the funds to execute on your own. And second to that, I think you're getting some kind of a team, right? Who will hopefully help execute stuff, help with some ideas, and help to do things that spreads awareness and spreads your music. But I think that, you know, if you're thinking about major labels in particular, I think that the only real reason for an artist today to be on a major label is if you really think you've got the stuff to be like a big top 40 smash act with big international radio hits, right? I think that the majors are still the best place to execute that kind of artist project, if that's what you are. But even in saying so, I would say you don't necessarily want to jump and do a deal with a major, even if you're in that situation, too early, right? I think that I've learned through my experience that it's important to be a pretty big fish in whatever pond you're in. And I think if you were the smallest act on a major, it might actually do more harm than good for you to be there. And I think you could say the same thing about, you know, indie labels, right? Like it's better to be the biggest artist on a small indie than the smallest artist. And so I think it's important to try to develop stuff on your own so that you have leverage once you're going into those situations and making those deals so that you're important to them and so that you're a priority for them once you're there. I think if you're not one of those kind of top 40 goal-oriented artists, and if you can find a way to fund stuff by yourself, you know, either through accumulating money through touring or if you have money, the ideal is to probably not do a deal with a label at all, and you can self-fund and you can kind of create your own sort of custom label around you with the funds that you have. But very few artists are in that position, right? And so then I think for the vast majority of artists, the reason to do a deal with a label is to get funding.
Yeah, it is. And yet we constantly hear about it's a catch-22. I mean, you know, I've been in the business a long, long time, and I came from an era when A&R and labels were a faith-based business, meaning they had faith in their own judgment about talent, but more importantly, they had faith that there was a marketplace out there in the world for you, and you had to be chosen to make music. And as you know, years ago, those decisions only, 10 to 15% of the max ever yielded any kind of results. And that's what carried the whole industry. The Michael Jacksons, the Barbra Streisands, the Bon Jovis, the AC/DCs, all of those huge successes, Beatles. But today we're in an era where it's all free and the values have changed around that. And, one of the things that's so important in having discussions and listening to people like you is you're on the front lines of today and speaking about what I think is so necessary for artists to really get and understand about today. And Eric and I are both of the belief that what it takes for an artist or a band to actually have a career in this era is so much more. There's so much more work that they have to do than just be great writers or great performers or great songwriters.
Yeah, it's really true. Back in the older days, the sort of great filter was that you needed money to record and you needed distribution, and those things were hard to get. And so the labels kind of acted as the filters. And then, as you said, maybe even only 10 or 15% of those even got anywhere.
Right.
And today, those barriers to entry don't exist because it's cheaper and easier to make music at home by yourself than ever. And you can distribute by yourself for basically no money. And so now the filter is just how do you stand out above all the noise?
Right.
And it seems like most artists that are breaking lately are doing it through a content strategy. But I think, there's more to it than just having a content strategy. I think that can definitely be the thing that gets you your initial hooks into people. I also think some kind of old-fashioned things never stop working, right? Like one of them being doing a great support set for a bigger act and kind of converting fans face to face one by one in that atmosphere. I think that's still worth something. And I think that collaboration is more important than ever too, because if you've got 1,000 followers and you collaborate with someone else who has 1,000 followers, you've just had a chance to maybe double your fan base, right? And so I think all those things are really important considerations for artists to break today.
Hey, insiders, we hope that you've been enjoying our featured conversation. Stay tuned because we've got so much value coming your way. But before we dive back in, a word from our sponsor. Hey there, insiders. Are you dreaming of making it big as a musician, artist, or industry pro? Well, at MUBUTV, we offer personalized coaching to help you turn that dream into reality.
Think of us as your personal guides, helping you polish your songs, craft your story, find your fans, and grow your social media like a pro.
No matter where you are in your journey, we've got the tools and strategies to take you higher. From live gigs to branding and marketing, our coaching is all about you.
Choose what fits your budget, from single sessions to value-packed bundles.
Start with a free 15-minute discovery call today at book.mubutv.com. Your music career is waiting. Remember why you started making music? That feeling of passion, hope, and longing, wanting someone to hear your story?
But chasing success can be confusing. Who do you reach out to? When? How do you avoid mistakes that could close doors?
At MUBUTV, we believe every artist deserves a clear path forward. That's why we've created 3 free guides that cover the essential skills every musician needs.
How to contact A&R executives with confidence. How to attract an artist manager who gets you. How to pitch your music for film and television placements.
These aren't just tips. They're blueprints designed for artists who want more than just dreams. They want results.
If you're listening right now on this podcast or watching on YouTube, look in the description below. Download these free guides that will change how you approach your music career forever.
Don't wait. Your future fans are waiting.
Hi, this is Einar Helde, co-founder and CCO at Ames API. Are you an insider? I am. Subscribe now.
Yeah, I would definitely say I even think the idea of, as you're speaking, when I look at people like Post Malone, there's a perfect example of somebody who had a viable career, a successful career, but my God, went to an entirely different level when he started collaborating outside of his genre. I mean, staggeringly so. I was amazed at how big those successes were. They were like, he knocked it out of the park in an area of music that wasn't his initial base.
Yeah, it's amazing to see stuff like that. You know, it's like the genre switch is hard to do, right? And I think that some new and young artists might take that lesson the wrong way and think that it's just okay to go ahead and switch up your genre dramatically. And I think the reason that it works for someone like Post Malone is because he had that foundation. You know, he had a lot of fans. He had a lot of people that are paying attention to him. He had a lot of name recognition. That kind of gave him that foundation to do that. And I think, you know, he did an amazing job with it, clearly. But collaboration, yeah, I think collaboration is super, super important for so many artists. And I think it's such a great way to just get your name out there to new potential fans.
You know, Neal, in an era where so much in the music business is transforming, what are the specific qualities that future artist managers need to have today?
I think that the most important thing for an artist manager is just to care. I think, you know, there's always going to be someone smarter. There's always going to be someone with a more clever idea. There's always going to be someone with like a more impressive roster or more staff or whatever. But I think that the managers who wake up every morning really thinking about their artists and who really care and who are really, you know, detail oriented and who are really passionate about helping their artists succeed are going to be the most effective and the best managers.
Interesting. You know, I want to sort of further go into that with you. Earlier in your career, you worked with legacy bands like System of a Down, Alice in Chains, and Deftones. What lessons from those experiences still inform how you develop younger artists today?
That's a great question. I think having really, really strong artist to fan connections is kind of a through line there that those artists have, and that I think is important for young artists trying to break today. I think, like, working on those acts, we did a lot of stuff to super serve their fan base. We did a lot of stuff to interact with them. We did a lot of stuff to make them feel special. We did things for them to interact with, like little like online games or wormholes or Easter egg things for them to find. And I think that is an important aspect that gets lost a lot today with how much immediacy there is with everything, right? I think a lot of people are so focused on the immediacy of a platform like TikTok, where you put a lot of effort every day into making an 8-second video that's hopefully going to hook someone and turn them on to you. And I think that, one of the things I learned from there was like, okay, once you have someone's attention, how do you bond them closer? And how do you bond them with each other, right? How do you give the fan base, the fan community, stuff to talk about with each other? Well, you do it through kind of this contrarian thing now of like things for fans to dig deeper into that actually takes more time. That's not so immediate. So what we do a lot is like, we'll make, kind of wormhole Easter egg containing websites for fans to go explore and then talk about. Or we will do things where, like, if you sign up for the artist's text list, you're going to get unreleased music downloads that nobody else is going to get. It's never going to be on Spotify, right? It's like, how do you do things like that where you're creating this deeper artist to fan connection, and you're giving interesting stuff for the fan community to talk about with each other?
Yeah, I totally agree. Neal, given the experience that Slush Management has had with global tours and festivals like Porter Robinson's Second Sky Festival, what do you see as the biggest opportunities and challenges in building the next generation of live experiences?
Well, let's see, opportunities and challenges. So the opportunity, I think, leads back to what I was just talking about, right? So with that example of Second Sky that you gave, we went really deep into putting in extra effort for immersive fan experiences. Like we cold called the theme park designers behind Disney's Star Wars Galaxy's Edge and Universal Studios Wizarding World of Harry Potter. And we got them to build all this really elaborate, amazing art installations. We had this like majestic 60-foot tall tree, and we had this VIP speakeasy bar that was like straight out of one of Porter's videos that you could walk through. And I think that when you're not just thinking about the bottom line and you're thinking about how to deliver incredible experiences to fans, then you've got those fans for life, right? You're really, really giving them amazing experiences. And so they're going to stick around. And so I think that's the opportunity. The opportunity is to gain lifelong fans by giving them incredible experiences, right? The challenges with the live touring and festival landscape, I think, are just honestly like the costs of it now. I think that the costs of all that stuff have gone up exponentially since the pandemic, and the artist revenue hasn't really gone up in a way that keeps up, hasn't really kept step, right? So, the crew that has to be hired to go out on the road and execute these things, or to execute these festivals, costs a lot more than they used to. All the gear that you're renting, from the sound to the lights to the LED walls, all that stuff costs a lot more. So I think that's the biggest challenge. And we're seeing that a lot of artists at the club and theater touring level right now often just can't make it profitable, right? Unless they get it into the black through their merch and their VIP programs. So I think that's the biggest challenge.
Yeah, it's an interesting quandary, because there used to be a tier of artists that would be able to tour little clubs or, smaller theaters, and, whether they were from the UK or from the independent scene, and come off a tour, they'd had a base, an album or two, and they'd be able to come off the road with, 20 or 30 or maybe 40 grand in profit, but it was enough to make the thing, at least make it worth it, or not be unviable. And now, as you just pointed out, that entire class of artists is completely wiped out.
Yeah, with all the venue closings just in the UK alone.
Yeah.
The amount of venues of that level that are closing.
And in the US, the amount of artists like that you're speaking of, and I'm sure you must have seen that.
Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, that's why I think, for us, we're trying to just get creative on how to make that stuff work. The most ideal situation is if you have an artist in a situation where they don't have to have the headline tour be profitable, then great. Like, let's go all in on making the craziest production that's ever, been brought into that size room that we're playing. And that is going to create an amazing fan experience. It's going to create lifelong fans, and they're going to have more people show up to the next one because they're all going to tell their friends how amazing it was, and we're going to maybe get better festival offers because of it, right? So if you can do that, that's kind of the best thing to do long-term strategy-wise. But a lot of artists are not in that position, right? A lot of artists, they have to make some profit on their touring in order just to live and to not have to go get a job at Starbucks or something, right? So then that's where we have to get creative as managers, right? And sometimes that means that like you don't get to have a live drummer and that has to be on track now, right? Or it means that you find creative ways to double up roles, right? So like maybe the front of house person also has to be production manager. Sometimes what we've done is we've even found ways to do lighting shows without bringing an LD, where the band can set up the gear and it all kind of runs to click on Ableton, and all you have to do is kind of plug in the lights every night and it runs itself. So I think we're always trying to find creative ways to still put on the best show possible while trying to make it feasible for the artists.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Neal, artist development, it has profoundly transformed over the last few years, like we've been discussing. From your vantage point, because you're on the front lines, do artists need to be more than just musical acts today? Not just to break through the noise, but to truly build and sustain a lasting career? Do they need to be, in other kinds of, brands? And do they need to be in movies or in TV or other elements besides music to really have sustainable careers?
Well, they definitely have to be marketers of their own music, right?
Okay.
I think gone are the days where they can just make music and sit back and let other people do that, unfortunately. So I would say that's number one. We love to do those other kind of partnerships you're talking about. We've done a bunch of fashion partnerships and gaming partnerships and brand partnerships. It's got to be authentic to the artist. It has to make sense, and it can't look like a complete curveball to the fan base. But I think if you can layer in those things in ways that are true to the artist and their interests, we love that. But I don't necessarily think you have to do it to have a career. But I think when the stars align, it's really additive, not only financially, but kind of just brand wise for the artist as well.
Neal, throughout your career, have there been any books, films, or documentaries that were particularly inspirational to you, professionally speaking, that you could recommend to our listeners?
I mean, everyone always talks about the Passman book, right? And that was definitely helpful. Maybe not inspirational, though, which is what you were asking. Actually, I recently, earlier this year, read a book that I think was really inspirational, not about the music business, but about an entrepreneur, Phil Knight, the founder of Nike. It's called Shoe Dog. And just as a business person and as an entrepreneur, reading his story and kind of how many hardships and how many impossible situations he had to overcome, and kind of how he had the grit to do it and how challenging it was, but how he kind of prevailed in the end was very inspiring. And I really recommend that book to anybody, not even just business people, but just, people that want to see examples of how hard work and grit and persistence is worth it.
Yeah. And how to overcome adversity.
Yeah.
In listening to you speak about that, I want to ask a sort of a question from you personally, but it's a professional question because you have been on the front lines of facing this, and it often isn't spoken of, which is what holds people back from success in their music careers? What have you found does that?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a few things. So I think one is kind of back to the point I was making a moment ago. I think like the need for artists to be marketers themselves now to some extent and to be involved with that, because I think some artists make the mistake of putting tons of hours into perfecting their music, and then they don't put that amount of time into trying to get people to hear the music that they put so much effort into creating.
Yeah.
I would say that's one thing. I'd say another one is trying to appeal to everyone. I think that was kind of like the old model where, you get your face on TV and your song on the radio and you hope everybody hears about you, even though most won't really care. And I think that the best model today is trying to get a core group of people to be obsessed with you rather than to get everyone to like you. And that means don't be afraid of alienating some people. Don't be afraid to have rough edges, and don't be afraid to be authentic, because while that might turn off some amount of people, it'll really endear you to the people who really get it and who really relate to that. And I think that's really who you want to focus on.
Yeah, I think that that's some really great advice. That's one of the biggest things that we talk about with artists, that, they work so hard and they bust their ass to get this great sounding product, and then they just put it out and expect it to, like, a million people are going to find out about it. It's just one of the great tragedies, of what we're talking about, and why we stress to our listeners that there's a whole other part of that equation in order to get your name known and to get out there, is to promote what you're doing. Why would you go through that trouble and just let it sit there and then wonder why it became a failure,
Yeah, and it sucks, and I hate it, honestly.
Yeah.
I'm kind of nostalgic for the kind of like classic rock day model where they could just be great songwriters and musicians and then not really, they had to do press, I'm sure they had to do interviews and stuff, but
right.
They didn't have to do nearly the amount of lift that artists have to do today. And but it's just the reality of the current landscape.
Yeah, no, I agree. I wanted to ask you, Neal, you've witnessed massive shifts in the industry, but your mission of helping artists realize their vision on their own terms has stayed constant. For the next generation of artists and managers, what advice can you offer, not just for building success, but real longevity and cultural impact?
Yeah, I think that firstly, I've been talking a lot about authenticity, and I think that's a through line that's really important through a lot of this. I think that artists need to write music from a place of passion and excitement and kind of like childlike play and wonder, which is usually how people start and get into music, and avoid the temptation to kind of write music that works that maybe they're not excited about, because ultimately it won't actually work if that's where it's coming from. Ultimately, what's going to make it work is that it's exciting to you, and that's what's going to make it exciting to other people. So I think that's kind of the foundational first thing. And the second thing is to kind of do things that develop your group of super fans, like we were talking about earlier, right? So don't think about just the immediate way of hooking people or building your name awareness, but think about how you're going to get people to spend more time with you and dive deeper into your world after that. How are you engaging with them in kind of deeper, more meaningful ways? How are you surprising and delighting them with the content that you're dropping and the events that you're doing, and getting them to create a fan community around that? You need to give them things to talk about with each other. And I think that if you're continuing to give them incredible experiences that make them feel like they're part of something bigger, that's how you're going to have multi-decades long career.
Neal, what is the best way for people to reach you? Is it through the website? Is it through socials, or what?
People can go to our Instagram. That's just Instagram.com/MGMT.
Beautiful. Neal, we want to thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Great conversation.
Great conversation with a lot of invaluable information for our audience, and we're very, very grateful to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Wow. What a sharp guy. I mean, he really knows what he's talking about. You get such a strong sense of his understanding of not only music, but of the culture and the, I guess, non-spoken parts behind it.
Right.
The culture behind music. One of the things that I thought was so interesting is he spoke about that element of world building, which I thought was really interesting. And what do we mean by world building? It means, I think he says, once you have people hooked, once you have people interested, can you have a world for them to dive into? Your aesthetic, your art, your videos, it all has to be cohesive and creative. And that's a very, very important part to understanding what it is that connects with an artist. I don't think artists a lot of times, especially at the beginning of their careers, give enough time and thought to that. But it is very important. And one of the other important elements of that is the whole aspect of collaboration. Who you collaborate with, both on your videos and your creative collaborations, maybe in artwork. I know Alan Niven
yes,
spoke about that. The collaborators, like the artwork,
right,
and so forth in a conversation that we did earlier. This is the same thing in terms of who you're going to be getting involved with artistically. I think of recently, like how Post Malone got involved with a lot of, country artists,
right,
and how he very easily crossed into that world. It wasn't artificial. It wasn't,
it's very natural.
Very natural. But that collaboration, it was thought out. It was thought out. And I thought that was a very, very interesting point that he made about the nature of, building a brand, building a world, that it's not just about your music. It's not just about great music. It's a whole kind of aesthetic that goes with the music.
Yeah, and one of the other areas that I thought was very interesting that we've talked about from time to time, but I don't think it's stressed enough from us, about why develop leverage. And, it's important to be a pretty big fish in whatever pond you're in, what he said, and developing stuff on your own so you have that leverage. And if you're not one of those top 40 goal-oriented artists that can self-fund, then probably don't do a label deal. You know what I'm saying? And that's what we've been talking about. What is that definition of success? What are those different elements that you find important? And so I think that is a huge thing. If you can develop leverage in many different ways, that can serve you in the future, whether you're dealing with a label in the future or you're dealing with an agent, a manager, etc.
I couldn't agree more, Eric. That's an absolutely essential point. And, one of the other things that he was speaking about, that Neal spoke of, is that whole element of, the opportunity to gain lifelong fans.
Yeah.
Remember, if you can build fans as an artist at the beginning of your career and throughout your career, building fans, okay, which is something that's different than having hit records or getting streaming numbers, building fans. If you can do that and you never forget that, you will always have a career. Never forget that. That's an essential element. And we see proof of that every single day with artists out there who have not had hit records, who have not had, records, period. They haven't had new recordings, and they're still viable. They're still making a living doing music. That's something that is most important and absolutely essential for every artist to never forget.
Hey, Insiders, thanks so much for tuning into this episode. We really appreciate it. To get show notes, links, and everything that was mentioned during this interview, head on over to our official website at MUBUTV.com/podcast/show notes. If you're enjoying the content and what we're doing here on the show, please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts from. And don't forget to rate and review our show at iTunes. 5-star reviews are always welcome and help to ensure that our podcast stands out on the top-rated and new and noteworthy charts on iTunes and our space. You can also find us at social media at Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter X, all ending with the handle MUBUTV, which is spelled MUBUTV. Don't forget to catch our flagship show, the MUBUTV Music Business Insider video series, airing every week on YouTube at youtube.com/MUBUTV. This show was produced and created by Rich Ezra and Eric Knight. Theme music by Disciples of Babylon, and be sure to tune in next week for another episode of the MUBUTV Music Business Insider Podcast.